Hill. With me now, Democratic Congresswoman Loretta Sanchez from California and Republican Congressman Rob Wittman from Virginia. Thanks to you both for joining me. I'd like to start, Congressman Wittman, with you and just get your reaction to the day's developments.
Well, I'm glad the diplomatic efforts have resulted in an agreement, but I'm highly skeptical of the agreement. I think that there are lots of things there that cause me pause. I think it's a tremendously difficult effort to identify, to control, and then dispose of all of these chemical weapons in a country where there's a civil war going on. We haven't defined how many sites would be looked at or inspected. What would happen if this doesn't come about? Is Assad trustworthy enough to actually allow these things to happen? I think it's extraordinarily difficult. And then on top of that, there's a timeline, a deadline of the middle of 2014. I want things to work diplomatically, but I'm highly skeptical because of the things that I believe are a severe challenge to all the parties involved.
Congressman, you're skeptical, but are you at all optimistic? I mean, if I'm not mistaken, you did vote against authorizing the president the use, or you have been against the use of force by the president. So this is ought to be a good first step, no?
It is, absolutely. Diplomatic efforts are exactly where we need to be. We need to make sure that they are verifiable and that we put the pressure on all the parties involved, specifically Syria, to make sure that this gets done. So I'm not in favor of a military effort here. I am hopeful that this works, but I know that we have to put tremendous amount of focus and pressure to make sure that this actually gets done and that it's verifiable and that we can assure that none of these chemical weapons are under the control either of Bashar Assad or of any of the rebels in the area, too. That's a concern to me, that some of these weapons might fall into their hands or forces that are friendly to the Assad regime.
Congresswoman Sanchez, I want to get your reaction to the day's events as well.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that with almost everything that my colleague just said, I would agree. I think he voices a real concern that many lawmakers, many of our colleagues will have on Capitol Hill. I am ecstatic that the United States wants to be just not a leader in war, but a leader in diplomacy. And so I believe many of my colleagues, and I hope my colleague that you just heard from, will work very hard to continue to put pressure on, to continue to assure that that Syria and Assad do eliminate these weapons. It's a very big task. And I would also say to Mr. Putin, we need your help. You want to be at the top of your game. You want to be recognized by the world. You will get that recognition if you help us to do this. And this is a very important step for all of these countries involved and for the world for us to get this done correctly.
You know, Congressman Wittman, here's my question to you, I guess. So the president and the administration have vigorously pursued this diplomatic path. I think we all would agree it is ambitious. It's going to be, complicated, but they're pursuing it. Now, if for some reason those efforts fail and the president had to come back to you and again ask for the authorization for the use of force, given that the diplomatic efforts have been pursued, would you in that case allow the vote in favor for the president?
I would still have reservations about using...
Go ahead, Congressman Wittman.
No, I would still be opposed to the use of military force. I think if the UN Security Council and the UN itself can't bring this to fruition and we can't verify that this happens, I think there are other opportunities out there for us to engage NATO and other partners in the world to bring different elements of pressure upon Syria to make sure that these chemical weapons get out of circulation and make sure that they are not used against the Syrian people and are not falling in the hands of those folks that may want to use them for deleterious purposes. I want to make sure that we do this, but do this without getting into a conflict in the Middle East. I believe a military action against Syria has the potential to turn into a massive, enduring mission. I don't believe that's where we need to be as a nation, and I don't believe that's in our best strategic interests.
Now, Congresswoman Sanchez, obviously Putin has taken quite a role here, but, we know that this is not that Russia doesn't have, they're not just doing this out of the goodness of their hearts, I might say, despite what you might have read in the op-ed. Russia has very specific interests with regard to Syria in terms of their naval installations, in terms of, this being a key military alliance. They see it as a key point of leverage. This is, to some degree, this is kind of remnants of the Cold War era. So, it seems to me that, to some degree, we do have to be cautious with regard regard to Russia, particularly when we talk about going back to the UN Security Council, given that we know that the Russians have been the ones all along who have threatened to block many of our efforts to this point?
Well, again, I do a lot of work because of the military committee that I sit on, a lot of work with Russia. There are so many treaties, so many other issues, non-proliferation, nuclear war, etc., that we work on together. Sometimes it's very difficult in whatever time period that we're trying to get that done, but we have had successes like with the New START treaty, etc. So I'm not willing to say that, you know, because we have had our differences in the past, somehow Mr. Putin cannot get this done. This is a big thing to get done, and he will have to put his shoulder to the wheel and help us to get this done. There's no doubt, and I think that the world is watching to see if in fact he can do that. That he should have other interests in Syria, well, that's that just happens to be the facts. That happens to be the case, but without trying at least to eliminate these weapons, which is the criteria that the president has said. The thing that he has said is that these weapons are dangerous, that they're used non-discriminately, and so we have to go after these weapons. If this is the best way that we can do it without firing a missile, I think that's a good thing.
All right. Well, and we shall see with regard to Mr. Putin, as Andrew Sullivan wrote recently, he now owns this process. So, hey, let's let him have it. Thank you, Congresswoman Loretta Sanchez. And